Welcome everyone to the July 9th Eugene City Council agenda. Welcome everyone at home and here. The first item we have up today is a work session on the Beltline Highway, Coburg Road to River Road. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Chris Henry to get us started.
With us today are Savannah Crawford from ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation. She's the project manager for the Beltline Facility Plan. I'm Chris Henry, the Transportation Planning Engineer. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update about the Beltline Facility Plan. Savannah is going to make the presentation, and I'm available to answer questions as part of the discussion following.
Good afternoon. My name is Savannah Crawford. I am the planner that has been working on this project with ODOT. I'm currently actually now housed out of Salem, so I can get you my contact information there. Thank you for having me. I'm going to get started on the PowerPoint. So this is for the Beltline Facility Plan. This is a project that we've been working on for several years now, really looking at solutions for the Beltline Highway, specifically from Coburg Road to River Road. Now, as most folks know, there is a lot of various issues on the Beltline Highway that we need to address. So there's congestion, there's a high crash rate within the segment of highway. Right now there are 90,000 trips that take that segment of highway every day. That's actually more than the nearby segment of Interstate 5. So it's critical that we actually start really identifying what kind of improvements we make for the facility. It was built in the 1960s. It was definitely not built for the level of traffic that is out there today. It was more of a rural environment back in the 60s, and it's now obviously very developed and a lot of traffic flows out there. So it started in 2008. Phase one, we started with existing conditions review, really examining what the issues are on the facility. We took that information and we started identifying solutions for the Beltline Highway. We had about 10 various concepts that we identified. They ranged from low build concepts, very small improvements, to very large, very expensive improvements. When we took these out to the community, we heard that too big was too big and too small was too small. So we went and we identified a variety of different concepts that were somewhere in the middle. The phase three was what we have been working on at this point. It's taking a closer look at each of the interchanges. So we've been looking at the facility as a whole in that segment, and then over the last year we've been looking at the interchanges themselves to really look at some of the more detailed components of those operational aspects of each of the interchanges. And we have all wrapped that up into our report into the facility plan. Also throughout this process, we've had several committees as part of this effort. We have a project management team, which is with Lane County staff, City of Eugene staff, and ODOT staff. We also have a stakeholder advisory committee that has been utmost critical to this process. Our stakeholders are comprised of a variety of neighborhood associations, business owners in the area. They've met throughout key milestones throughout the starting of this process and have provided a lot of positive feedback into this effort. They've been very helpful. We also have a steering committee that have also met at key milestones in this project. Thank you, Councilor Seglet and Councilor Clark, for participating on that. We have 2 City of Eugene City Councilors, 2 Lane County Board of Commissioners, and 2 ODOT upper managers that participate on that effort. And then throughout the course of this project, we've held several public open events. We've had anywhere from 75 to 150 participants at each event, so they've been very well attended. We started with this effort with some evaluation criteria. When we identified the 10 concepts to evaluate, our committee said, okay, how do we narrow these concepts? So there are a variety of factors that we looked at, and within each factor there are a variety of criteria that were established as well. So mobility, safety, environmental impacts, community livability, cost effectiveness were all criteria that were considered as part of this effort and fed into the 3 concepts that you're seeing today. The facility plan has 3 concepts that we are recommending to move into NEPA. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act. This is going to be the much more detailed process that we couldn't get into at the planning stage. So what this will look at is it will look at real property impacts, it will look at real environmental impacts, it will actually provide more detailed cost estimates for each of these concepts so we as a community can be better informed as which one to select when it comes time to construct something. You'll notice the cost up there. Those costs are in today dollars, 2013 dollars, and they do not include right-of-way. So that's just a heads up that these are on the lower end of what we'd expect an actual construction project to be. All of the concepts have similarities for River Road and Delta Highway interchange improvements, and they all do have some sort of additional lane over the Willamette River. The two concepts that include a local arterial bridge, and I'll get into detail about this in just a second, is the improved existing concept and the auxiliary lane concept. One item that I wanted to note here is there are several themes that kept coming up as part of this process. These themes really were bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. So some of the maps that you'll see in front of you today show impacts to nearby bicycle facilities. We wanted to note that just because they're showing impacts does not mean we won't make improvements to those facilities at time of construction. So we are committed to making sure that all connectivity remains in place. Any concept can also accommodate bicycle and pedestrian facilities. This is important to note because a variety of concepts, some of them do house bicycle and pedestrian facilities better than others, but nonetheless, they all can accommodate that. And another key theme was the river access. We heard from emergency services, we heard from the public that maintaining river access for both safety, recreation purposes, and emergency services is critical. So we wanted to definitely note that in mind as well. Start with the improved existing concept. What you see up here is in yellow. So the yellow is the local arterial bridge concept. The reason why this is a different color is because we wanted to emphasize that this would be envisioned as a lower speed local facility. So this would not be a highway facility. We would envision travel lanes in each direction. We would envision bike lanes, sidewalks. It would be very much a local facility to allow for a lot of the traffic movement that's coming from the Santa Clara area to the Green Acres area. There's a significant amount of traffic that actually just that just crosses the bridge to make those movements. So what you're seeing here, the improved existing, is really taking what you see out there today and improving it. So you're seeing a lot of the same configurations. You're still seeing an underpass, a River Avenue, Division Avenue. You're seeing the addition of a local arterial bridge, improvements to Delta, Good Pasture Interchange, River Road. And again, you're seeing a new lane across the river as well. The auxiliary lane concept has some similarities to the one I've just explained. Again, you have the local arterial bridge concept. The biggest change here is the River Avenue, Division Avenue interchange. Instead of an underpass, you see a new interchange at this location. So this is an overpass. That is the biggest difference in this particular location. The collector-distributor concept is quite different. What you see here is two new parallel structures to Beltline Highway. This would continue to be a highway facility, both of those new parallel structures. What this allows is for people who want to stay on Beltline can travel all the way through without having anybody come in on or off at this location. So anybody who wants to get off at Division, for example, would start here, take this collector-distributor bridge, and then go over to Division Avenue. Same going east. If you wanted to get off, let's say Good Pasture, you would take this collector-distributor bridge to Delta Highway. You would never actually have to get on Beltline or get off of Beltline at that location. So you're eliminating that weave movement. So next step, so those are the three concepts that we're recommending for NEPA for further analysis. Moving forward, we currently have $5 million for NEPA and design, but we do not have any construction funds designated for this segment of highway at this point. Before NEPA can begin, we definitely need the facility plan to be adopted. There are several updates that need to occur from the City of Eugene side when it comes to this particular adoption process. So at this point, what our plan is based upon is City of Eugene land use assumptions and traffic assumptions. So right now you guys are updating your TSP, you're going through Envision Eugene. So when that is complete, we'll roll all of those assumptions up into the facility plan to make sure they're consistent, and then we can go into a full-blown NEPA process. NEPA typically takes about 2 years to complete, depending on the type of documentation that is needed. And we are committed to trying to figure out what to do with Beltline in the meantime. So we've been saying that you would not see major construction or major improvements to the Beltline Highway for another 10 to 15 years based upon the fact that we do not have funding. So what do we do in the meantime? You've recently seen the ramp meters that came out of the Jobs and Transportation Act. We are looking at possibly doing some ramp extensions over at the Delta Highway interchange. There are a variety of things that we want to continue to look at to improve Beltline in the interim before we can get a major funding package in the works. So that is my overview. Are there any questions at this point? Yes.
In the queue and Betty in the queue. First, I want to ask the two counselors who've been participating in the process, Councilor Clark and Councilor Surratt, if they have something they want to say. Councilor Clark? Councilor Clark?
Okay. Think about that for a second. I appreciate the opportunity to serve on this. It's been 6 years now that we've been working on this, with 2 more to go for NEPA and 10 to 15 estimated for a real fix to Beltline. For me, that's unacceptable. I know that's the constraints of the system and the statewide system, and it's not a source of soreness by any means, but for the folks who live out there in that part of North Eugene, that's an extreme problem. So while I'm hopeful that the rest of my colleagues see all the work that's been done and recognize the value and recognize that there are 3 good choices here, and that we can help get you to proceed through that process, I wonder how we might develop strategies that would move the construction phase more quickly. That's what I'd like to know. Is it all about money? So should we really be focusing, as the mayor asked us recently, to consider new initiatives when the legislative session begins this next year, for those of us especially that work on the Intergovernmental Relations Committee? Should we be focused on an all-out charge to work with our legislators to see if we might move that up in the funding process a little bit? Those are the sort of things I'd really like us to focus on, but I appreciate all the hard work that you guys put in on this.
So to answer your question, for one, regarding city priorities, that's a conversation the city needs to have. It's definitely an ODOT priority to move this project forward as soon as we can. We are committed to trying to do so, but yes, funding is a huge constraint.
And there may be more focus from the city's perspective through adoption of our transportation system plan. That's where we give the nod to this facility plan and say, continue forward with the environmental process. Nothing can happen until that environmental process is complete, and it can't begin until we adopt our transportation system plan, unless we split off those processes. But as we're going forward now, it's adopt our transportation system plan with the facility plan, begin the environmental analysis. That's 2 years. During that, say, 3 years of time, you could work on funding issues. We are going to propose including the arterial bridge in a system development charge calculation as part of the, following on to the adoption of the transportation system plan. That could, if approved, provide a potential funding source of match money, perhaps, from the city side to contribute to construction of that arterial bridge. So something that could happen sooner rather than later.
Is it at all possible, and if so, how would we go about the process of, of the NEPA approval separate from the TSP process, if we wanted to move that up and not wait another year?
So what we are going to do is we are going to start not full NEPA, but we're going to start the conversations for NEPA because we know that the city is moving forward on a variety of their planning efforts. So the TSP, Envision Eugene, for example. So over the next year, we are going to have the conversation. We're going to continue to do some analysis on the variety of concepts that you see here before we get into a full NEPA process. So it will be a soft start, if you will, because we don't want to delay that part of the process much further.
I would ask, help the rest of our colleagues that don't spend all of the meetings on this understand what's involved in our decision and approval process from here so that we can begin the
So what will be needed, so we've been working closely with the City of Eugene on both Envision Eugene and with the TSP, so we are aware of those timelines. What will be happening is at this point, this is a good start for you to become more familiar with the plan. At some point in the near future, when the TSP comes to you for adoption, we would anticipate that the facility plan would also come as a package with that particular adoption process. And then it will go to the Board of County Commissioners after that for adoption. Now, once it's adopted, we can go and move forward into a full NEPA process. Again, it's a very costly process, so we want to make sure that all of our documentation is consistent with the cities, and that's really legal. We have to make sure it's consistent. So that will be your role over the next 6 months to a year. I'm not sure exactly where we stand at that point.
Can the city separate those processes so that we do this separately from the full TSP and thereby get it done sooner?
We cannot separate the processes based upon the fact that we do not have a consistent document right now.
Okay.
So right now, our plan is based off of certain Envision Eugene assumptions, certain TSP assumptions, and it's really not a consistent document per the land use laws that we have to work with.
We'd essentially be doing the same amount of work if we tried to adopt this facility plan separately. We'd have to make it consistent with the transportation plan, and I don't think that there's a time savings to be had there. You know, as Savannah mentioned, we're revalidating the modeling from Envision Eugene from the land use side and how the transportation system works with the land use, including additional projects that have been identified in the transportation planning process. Once we have those modeling results and the policy set that the community resource group has been working on, then we'll start the adoption process of the transportation system plan, probably late this year, maybe early next year.
But that's based on, we're going to need to finish Envision Eugene first before we dive into the TSP, right? More or less?
The transportation system plan is the transportation element of the comprehensive plan.
So it can work parallel?
Yeah, I think they are parallel. That's how we've been moving throughout the process.
We don't have to wait to finish Envision Eugene before we can. Or, let me ask a better question. We're still going to have to wait for the completion of Envision Eugene before we get everything that we need to begin NEPA, correct?
So at this point in time, I don't know, you're looking at you're the planning staff there. So in short answer, yes. So at this point, our plan is going to be based off of your land use assumptions. Our plan goes out to 2035, and your current land use plans do not.
That may be a troubling part of this. Okay. Thank you very much.
Councilor Surratt, you have anything?
I just want to say, from the meetings, I came in on this process very late in the game, since it started in '08, and I only joined the council at the end of 2012. So, but I want to appreciate especially the stakeholder outreach and the community outreach, and in the meetings that we had when I would raise questions about what about this residential street or what about these businesses, it was apparent that you had been making those connections, having those conversations, because depending on which of the three options we choose, we're going to have different impacts on people on the ground there in terms of private property right-of-way and how people are used to getting around there now. So I just want to note that there has been, I think, a good process in terms of community engagement, and that we're not just trampling across the landscape willy-nilly, that we are doing this in a thoughtful way and with the input and important input of people who in the immediate are right there and going to be most impacted by whatever choice we make. Obviously, lots of other people in the region use this interchange, but in terms of impacts on the ground, there'll be some big ones, I think, and so I wanted to just call that out and make sure that other councilors knew that that was part of this process.
I just wanted to say it's nice to see you, Savannah. We
you as well.
missed you.
Thanks.
I also wanted to say that, because I feel like I have to say it every time, that the funnel for dollars seems to get smaller and smaller all the time. So a lot of decisions are just being driven by the fact there are no resources out there. So it has sort of lessened the ambitions of the state and the federal government in terms of transportation and the dollars that flow to us. So that's just an ongoing challenge we have. All right, Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. I really just kind of have, at this point, I just have one question. You mentioned that it's 90,000 trips a day. And so I'm wondering, especially the first concept with the arterial bridge, how many trips a day will that remove from the main pass-through?
So our projections are out to 2035, so our 2035 projections are 17,000 trips would be removed off of
Would be
the
removed,
highway.
17,000?
Yes,
Okay.
they would be taking that local arterial bridge.
And, okay, so 90 minus 17 is 73.
For future, so we're
But that
projected out
might increase-
110,000 in the future, minus 17, right?
Oh, I see, okay. So the other two concepts, it looks like they probably won't remove any trips per day from the main facility. Would just make it flow better is the idea?
So the improved existing and the auxiliary lane concept would both have that local arterial bridge. So that would be the same amount being removed
I see.
on that particular, those two concepts. The collector distributor bridge, I would have to go back and look at the analysis to determine how much would be taking those two parallel facilities, but the parallel facilities would be taking some off of the main line as well.
Right, so all of the solutions add motor vehicle capacity across the Willamette River. There's additional lanes and the potential to add bicycle and pedestrian facilities as well.
Yeah, I see that part. So, okay, just one more thing. So in 2035, you're saying that 17,000 trips less, but the trip number in 2035 will be over 110?
That's right. That's what we're projecting. And so what we've done is we've ensured that all of the concepts that have been identified will handle that added traffic in the 20-year horizon and still have some capacity left over.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Taylor?
So in any of these plans, you're talking about another bridge across the river, is that right?
That's right.
Where would that be?
So the bridge across the river would be to the north of Beltline. So the local arterial bridge would be just north of Beltline. And then when you have the two parallel structures, I want to note that this would still be classified as Beltline Highway because they are parallel, would be one just immediately north and one just immediately south, parallel to Beltline.
So to put a bridge across the river, do we have to have a vote of the people? I know people voted against having the Berry Street Bridge wider than it was.
That is something I would have to go back
You know,
and look into.
we can take a look at that. I don't know the answer right now, and I don't know if anybody does at the moment, but we can get back
Okay,
to you on that.
thank you, that's
Any other questions, comments? Councilor Zelenka?
Articulate clearly for folks that are listening to this maybe for the first time what the problems we're trying to fix are in this.
Right. So what you're seeing out there, the problems are there's some safety concerns. We have a high crash rate. We're consistently in the top 10% of crash rates within the state. That is not a good top 10% number to be in. There's a lot of congestion. So you're seeing the configurations right now of the facility really cannot handle the traffic. Delta Highway, for example, you're seeing two conflicting loop ramps that happen. So when people are trying to get off, people are trying to get on. It's the configuration is just really creating some congestion. You see the congestion out there today, and it will just continue to get worse. So those are the primary factors that triggered this.
So it's kind of complicated, but the crisscross and merge that
Right.
happens there gets handled by eliminating that loop in the south east
That's what-
corner, right?
Right.
And having people exit or enter Beltline different ways.
Right, exactly.
Does that mean that there's a lighted intersection both at the south side of that intersection and the north side of the intersection? Well, there is one at the north one, right?
There is one at the north, but yeah, we would be projecting one, a signalized intersection at the southern quadrant as well.
Where the people would come off.
Right, and we actually have a handy little simulation that I need to post on the website that was great to show how that would interact. It's a fun little simulation that we can provide.
So is there, is there a cost breakdown by each of these different kinds of fixes that are occurring? Like if we just focused in on the intersection of Delta and Beltline versus the Arterial Bridge? It's just all lumped together.
Right now, it is all lumped together. I do have that information. We did go do a detailed cost breakdown. One of the things that we're currently working on right now is actually a cost breakdown for interim improvements. So we'll have that information in the near future as well.
When will that be available? Different cost breakdowns for that?
It will be ready. I can submit it in a couple of weeks to whomever is interested.
A couple
Yeah.
weeks, okay. And then within NEPA, there'll be a no-build option.
There's always a no-build option in NEPA.
That doesn't seem like any of this incorporates a potential for an MX route to this.
Oh, I'm really glad that you brought that up. So we have been working really closely with LTD throughout this process. So one thing that we want to do is, as we move forward into NEPA, we want to keep them engaged. We know that there is a future MX route planned at some point in the future, so we want to make sure that anything we do does not preclude them from that. Right now, what we're finding and what we've heard from LTD is that nothing precludes them at this point from looking at certain transit options on the facility or within the facilities.
Well, there's not planned for a dedicated lane through this area. It would be in traffic.
That is to be determined. So there are a variety of different, I don't want to speak too much for LTD, but my understanding is there are a variety of different transit options that they could look at when it comes to these facilities, whether it's MX or something else that's to be determined.
Is that also true for the whole Beltline corridor? The ability to add a bus rapid transit through that area or a light rail?
I mean, for the entire, not just my segment,
Yeah,
but
right.
I would have to ask LTD. Yeah.
Okay. And then, Chris, this is or isn't in transplant?
The study is in transplant. We've identified the problem, and in 2006, the council made this the highest priority for improvements in our region. But the project, the local agreement on what to do has not been included in the transportation system plan. I mean, that's what's coming.
Because there is no.
Right. Well, we have Transplan, which is the Eugene Springfield Transportation System Plan, but we're moving forward from that.
So I'm curious, how does transplant and this ODOT process work together? And Mike was talking about being in parallel, but how do they work? They use the same information, and so how do they influence each other? How does transplant, for instance, influence what ODOT's doing?
Transplan identifies the transportation needs for the community, and that leads to project development. And the facility plan helps identify what the specific project details are. And when we're considering major investments like this, ODOT and the federal government wants to see a local agreement on what the solutions are. And so the facility plan and then the National Environmental Policy Act process builds that agreement on what to do. So it's necessary to be included in our transportation system plan to show that we agree that there's a problem to solve, and then we need to have the detailed work, design work through the following on from the facility plan to actually build it. Maybe another way to say that is we could have a placeholder saying build something here, but we don't know what it is exactly. And then you develop the facility plan to say what are the range of things that could be built, and then you go into the environmental process to pick the one that you go get the funding for. And right now we're saying we need $200+ million to solve this problem, but we can do some things in the interim at lower costs as well.
Do we need to solve the whole problem? Is there a cheaper option to do that than, just solve, for instance, the Beltline Delta Highway intersection and not the overall congestion
Yes.
arterial? It's
Yes.
possible to break it up into pieces parts, right?
Right. Included in the improve existing concept are elements of what was called the low build alternative. And we could do some of those things, extending the ramps, links to reduce some of the merging and diverging or weaving that happens and the conflicts associated with that are some things that could be done in the interim. Removing that southeast loop ramp at the Delta Highway interchange is something that could be done in the interim. Building the arterial bridge to the north could be something done separately from improvements to the main line. So there's ways to phase or slice the problem up into more digestible pieces.
So Savannah, when NEPA occurs, you look at these bigger projects, but it would allow us to do subsets of them only, right?
Now, there are a few ways that we can go into NEPA, and that's one of the things that we will be working on over the next few months is how do we break up NEPA, or do we break up NEPA? So there are options to go into a full NEPA process and look at all of the concepts as a whole, and that could be very costly. Some new options that have recently come up are segmenting it out a little bit more. So looking at maybe just the Delta interchange, like you said, and identifying what improvements can be made, what the NEPA process looks like for that. But it's a conversation that we need to have with FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration.
Because, for instance, the low build option, could that be incorporated into the NEPA? And is it going to be?
So I'm going to take a step back about the way that these concepts were derived. So the low build option was one of our earlier concepts that had some ramp extensions, some low build improvements. As a standalone concept, that did not meet the evaluation criteria because it did not meet enough of the benefit that we needed for Beltline Highway. Now that being said, those actually rolled into what is called the improved existing concept. So what you see out of a low build concept is actually a phase, if you will, of a larger concept. So those are things that still can happen over time and feed into a larger project.
Last question, 90,000 trips per day at this intersection escalating to 110 by 2035, so that's a 20-year projection. What's embedded in that? This seems kind of like straight line ruler projections, which have often been proved to be wrong in different scenarios. And we've got a lot of things coming with price of gasoline, peak oil, and other and driving habits of people. How's that incorporated? It doesn't seem like it's incorporated in the projection.
There's a lot of information that goes into the projections, and I would love to be able to spout out everything. I'm not going to be right now, but I'd be happy to send you our methodology report if you're interested.
It's based on the modeling that we use for the regional transportation model that is affected by the Envision Eugene process as well. So it's not a straight line. It's not just looking at the past and projecting the future. It's based on the land use, demand, and the choices that people make in that model that's also calibrated to actual counts on the streets.
If we could get more information about that, that'd be great.
Councilor Evans?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A couple of things I want to touch on. Going back to the BRT build-out map for LTD, and I've looked at that for the better part of 7 or 8 years, that we are looking to build out MX at some point along the Beltline within that framework. So I'm kind of concerned about whether or not that is still in play. Are you guys, talking to each other? I'm sure you are talking about each other about this, because my sense of it has always been that we will have some type of MX facility that will take us from West 11th all the way over to Springfield. Am I correct in that, or are we looking at different options, or as some people want to term it, MX Light? Where are we at with that plan based upon what you've got right here?
Right, so we have been working closely with LTD throughout this process because we do know that they have plans for some sort of transit service within the segment of Beltline that we're looking. So we've had the conversations with them regarding the local arterial bridge, versus the collector distributors to see which ones could house some sort of transit service. And we anticipate that LTD will be a key player in the NEPA process as well.
I think it's important to point out that this is not a bus rapid transit project. And LTD doesn't know or hasn't initiated the process of planning in detail what the system would be or could be on Beltline. But as Savannah said, the arterial bridge, it's shown conceptually, so it's a concept of 5 lanes wide, and 2 of those lanes, or one of those lanes, could be for bus rapid transit. And those are details to dig more deeply into in that National Environmental Policy Act work.
Would that also include the possibility of the construction of the new River Road station, which has been talked about in a couple of different places? One was the old Santa Clara School location, or doing some other kind of development along that sector with having a transit station facility there.
That's more likely to be addressed in upcoming planning that's going to be coming to you pretty soon, the next few months, looking at multiple transportation corridors, key transportation corridors as part of the Vision Eugene process, and looking at how all modes of transportation in those corridors, looking at River Road, Highway 99 through downtown and out to Lane Community College. That is a study, a very large study that we're going to be starting on, and we'll be here talking to you a lot about that, as well as the community. That's where some of the station locations discussions will occur.
And that would possibly include the north-south, either north collector, south collector, as part of maybe some scheme in that development, potentially?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. So here's the other question that I have. I'm deeply concerned about the collateral effects of any kind of reconfiguration that it has on the west end of Beltline, considering the congestion that we have coming, that continues to grow at the Barger Beltline intersection, as well as West 11th, as well as Roosevelt, and there's a continual boom in residential construction in the Bethel area, more specifically around Roosevelt, Avalon, and other things. And I'm assuming that there will be commercial development following that to service that residential development. And so based on the congestion that we have now, and it continues to grow, how will this impact the future? And are we looking at going to be doing a NEPA process and the EIS for the Barger interchange?
I believe in our transportation system plan, we've identified a study for the Barger corridor. No? Thought we did. It's certainly not part of this Beltline facility plan, because the project study area is from, effectively Coburg Road, but Delta Highway to River Road.
I understand it, but there's going to be a collateral effect of what this particular plan will have on that end of it.
Councilor Pauling?
Thank you. I won't spend too much time on the LTD. I've been on their steering committee since 2003, so we have had kind of a discussion about future routes from the 30,000-foot level. But as Chris said, we are starting to look at the multi-route phasing of LTD, so I won't spend any time on that. I don't know if this is too early in the process, but I was on the original group for about 3 or 4 months until we realized that the project was actually starting west of Coburg Road, and Mike volunteered to take over. But have we involved the public safety sector in the discussions on these designs, primarily Eugene Police Department, Eugene Springfield Fire EMS, State Police, and the Sheriff's Office?
So we do have an emergency services representative on our stakeholder advisory committee.
Okay.
We've also worked with Oregon State Police on this effort as well. So there has been some communication with emergency services.
And Eugene Police as well
Yes.
has attended our open houses.
Yes.
Okay. And then also, in looking at the 3 recommended scenarios, or concepts, I should say, it looks as though that, one way or the other, they're going to have to cross the river, and it also looks like it severely impacts the sand and gravel plant there at, just off of the Beltline. After the way the city treated the sand and gravel company here a number of years ago, I hope we've involved them in the very start of the discussions to try and, one, smooth that fiasco over, and also to involve them so when the time comes that they'll be a little bit more willing to work with the city than perhaps they might have been before. So, that, in looking at these diagrams, it's going to impact their property quite a bit. So I'm glad that's going. And then, I wish I could read my own writing. Oh, yeah, and also on the, some of the designs, has there been any studies, and again, this may be too early in this process, as to the impacts on what these designs are going to do to the arterial roads in the immediate area, such as on the first concept, you have the yellow line that goes up to Delta in Green Acres, it looks like. Where are those cars going to go? How's that going to impact Green Acres, which turns into Crescent Drive? How's that going to impact the other end of it down in the Santa Clara area? Have we studied those impacts?
Yeah, we've done some high-level analysis to determine what kind of trips will be going in those areas. What you're seeing is for the Green Acres area, a lot of traffic is going to the commercial site primarily. We have, again, a high-level, and I can provide those as well to show you what the trip generation is. But we will get into more detailed analysis in the NEPA phase to determine specific impacts. Noise, for example, all of those will be addressed in NEPA.
Okay. And then one last thing is when we're talking about fix it all versus a little at a time, we recently have had the pleasure of the metered ramps at Beltline and Coburg, and to come out there between, I'd say, 3:30 and 5:30, 6 o'clock any weekday night, I don't think it's working. So my feelings is that we should just look at the entire stretch and work on the entire stretch instead of piecemeal it here and there, because you fix a little part here, it's just going to back up the problem elsewhere.
Councilor Clark?
Thank you, Mayor.
Last bill.
I agree to a certain extent with George in that I've done that many times, and if you're going to be involved in that area between 3:30 and 5:30, plan on an hour. But the issue I think that Savannah mentioned with regard to this being in the top 10% of crash locations in the state is one of the more important parts of this discussion, because ODOT measures volume and capacity and assigns a percentage. And they have standards about whether it meets or doesn't meet, or whether it's so bad it's what they consider a failing facility. And this has, for some time at each of those intersections, been a failing facility before we even start talking about growth. And when we're talking about the plans we're doing with Envision Eugene to make us so much more compact, for example, the 1,000 new units of multifamily that have been pushed up into the north part of Eugene, into the north part of Coburg Road, the hundreds and hundreds of new residential residences that are going to be built in that area are going to put a considerable strain, and again, it's already in the 90+% at most of those intersections, and is considered a failing facility. It's one of the worst in the state. So from my perspective, I think we ought to be putting a great deal more energy into fixing it faster. I appreciate very much and would say out loud again, thank you to Representative Nathanson, who did such a good job of finding funding for us to do things like the ramp meters and some of the other more minor fixes to make that work a little more smoothly. But it is, again, still a failing facility, and I think it cries out to be rebuilt. And I'd let Alan know that that's one of the reasons some of the piecemeal and smaller options were dropped off the table early on because they don't even come close to helping us make it a non-failing facility now, much less 20 years from now. Those options won't even get it out of the failing category. The options we still have on the table have I want to say this accurately, I'm not certain of their level of capacity to get us out of the failing category. However, those particular options, while they may get us out of the failing category, have, I lost my train of thought there, yeah, I'm going to pass because I forgot.
All of the alternatives under consideration, except for no build, meet the ODOT mobility standards for crossing the river.
By 2035.
Correct.
So with that, I'm going to end this particular work session item, and thank you very much for the
Changing the
presentation. And I'm sure you would be glad to give people more information
Yes,
if they
do
wanted.
contact me with any more questions. Beltlineplan.com is the website. Feel free to get on there and look at our concepts.
Thank you very much. Very informative. Thank you. Next up is our work session and possible action on Envision Eugene implementation residential redesignation. City Manager,
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Carolyn and her team.
welcome.
Thank you. I'm just going to turn it right over to Heather.
Good afternoon. So just wanted to do a little bit of a recap for you before you get into your discussions. So as you saw from the agenda item summary for the meeting today, now under consideration are 3 areas for redesignation and rezoning. Those are the Crow Road Study Area, the Gillum Road Site, and the Irving Road Eagles Site. And these are efficiency measures, land use efficiency measures that would accommodate about 631 low-density residential dwelling units, and those would otherwise have to be accommodated through UGB expansion. This estimate, the 631 low-density residential dwelling units, reflects the removal of Rest Haven from consideration for redesignation per the property owner's request. As you know, this has already gone through Lane County and Eugene Planning Commissions. For these 3 sites, both planning commissions recommended approval of the proposal. We held a joint public hearing with Lane County Board of Commissioners on June 3rd. The record was left open during the public hearing and during the open record period, of which you have the new written testimony that we received in your packet. There was no new testimony against these 3 sites. During the public hearing, Commissioner Bozovich asked some questions. Those are addressed in the agenda materials in front of you. And yesterday, we went to the Board of County Commissioners for their deliberations. They asked for written confirmation that eWeb can serve the Crow Road area because it has portions above 500-foot elevation. In talking with eWeb, they will be providing us written confirmation, and so the board will continue their deliberations on July 22nd.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you. You touched on that last piece there, and I watched y'all yesterday on TV, and I thought you did a good job, the commissioners. Is it my understanding that they either did or are going to formally separate these as separate ordinance or not?
No, they decided, they talked about separating Crow and Irving into 2 separate ordinances. They decided to go ahead, the motion was to request for eWeb to submit something in writing confirming the issue with Crow Road, which was why they were talking about separating them. And
But
then
they put it to a 4th reading, right?
And they did put it in, yes. And so 4th reading and deliberations would be on July 22nd.
So if at that 4th reading they separate this, what happens next?
As far as for us, I mean, I think...
What's the impact on the process, and what would be required of the city?
We believe that tentatively the impact on the process would be that for Lane County, they would probably have to do additional readings of those new separate ordinances. But our ordinance doesn't go into effect until their ordinances do, so we can go ahead and continue with our deliberations and action, even if that ends up, even if they end up getting separated through the county.
If they separate and approve one and not the other, what's the impact on our work if we don't separate them?
Yeah,
Lena's coming.
we don't separate them? Sorry, thank you. That's probably more appropriate, but the attorney answer this question.
In that event, we would come back to you and ask you to amend the ordinance to remove the part that the county didn't approve, so that the ordinance that you're being asked to approve basically says it doesn't go into effect unless and until the county adopts basically the same substantive provisions. So if the county adopted two of the three, then we'd come back to you and ask you to delete the third, and then those two would go into effect.
So essentially, until they finish their work, we really don't know for certain what we should be approving, yes?
I think that we can go ahead and take action today on the single ordinance. It did seem to me that although they discussed breaking them into two separate ordinances, the motion was to bring back one, and so it seems like that's their intent to act on one ordinance.
I'm not certain I saw their intent the same way. Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Want the motion on the table?
I will.
Oh, Councilor Foley.
Yeah, I just have one question about the information coming back from eWeb. Is that going to be like in a form of a letter, or is that in a form of a eWeb master plan, part of their master plan, and will that include also different options and projected costs, or is it just saying, yes, this is our plan for the future for this area?
So at this point, we'll be getting a letter from eWeb. They are starting a master planning process similar to us updating our transportation system plan, and we'll have to update all of our facilities plans. That their master planning process will take into account the Crow Road area and the capacity that we're assuming there, as well as everywhere in the city. So their letter is going to acknowledge that the Crow Road area is part of their master planning process and that the area is serviceable with water. We won't know until they're done with the master planning process what exactly is needed, what type of facility is needed to serve that area. And that's okay. I mean, it's part of their modeling for their planning process. But at what we need at this stage, they can serve it, and they know that we want them to include it in their modeling.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. Is part of the land that you're rezoning in the Crow area outside the UGB?
No.
Oh, okay, I misread that, I guess. And for the water, if eWeb has to do something to serve this area with water, who pays for that? The ratepayers?
Part of it gets, just like anywhere else in the city, gets paid through development. Part of it is through just their normal processes for, I think systems development charges end up paying for things. I mean, the development pays for the infrastructure, and if it's a big capital project, then it goes through their normal financing process.
Okay, thank you.
I move to adopt Council Bill 5116, an ordinance concerning Envision Eugene residential redesignation to redesignate and rezone annexed residential properties.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Under discussion. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. None in opposition. It passes. Thank you. With that, unless somebody has another... There's one more. One more? Two.
I move to adopt Council Bill 5117, an ordinance concerning Envision Eugene residential redesignation to redesignate and rezoned unannexed residential properties.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. None in opposition. It passes. So with that, I think we're through with this item for today, and unless anybody has anything else, through with the business of the day. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Shall I have it ready for